Hey ExJWers, thanks again for stopping by. If you're new to the channel, my name is Riley and I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. Before I proceed any further, I just want to say that in this video, I'll be speaking about some potentially anxiety-inducing subjects. There will also be some footage that you may find distressing, so if you proceed to watch this video any further, please do so under advisement. This video is going to be quite a personal one, and to be honest, I've had more than a few reservations about whether or not to make it at all. But in the end, I decided to do it because I want to help as many people as possible by sharing my experiences, both good and bad. And ultimately, that is the reason why I started this channel in the first place. Okay, here goes. In early March of last year, I had an anxiety attack. I was at work in the office at the time when it happened. I'd felt it building up for a while. I tried really hard to pull myself together, but in the end, it was too much and I just broke down. Thankfully, only one other person in the office was aware of the situation, so in terms of embarrassment, it could have been a lot worse. Here's what happened. On the 20th of February 2021, Russia invaded the Ukraine in what most of the world's governments regard as an unjustified attack on the country's sovereignty. Now, like most people, I watched the news in absolute horror as thousands of people fled their homes from a war which was now at their very doorstep. Now, any kind of war is an absolute tragedy and extremely distressing by those directly affected by the conflict, as well as by onlookers. But this war in particular, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this, has special significance for anyone who's familiar with JW doctrine. Now, besides the fact that JWs believe wars and reports of wars to be one of the signs of the end of this system of things, they also believe that Russia and its allies represent a warlike entity referred to in Bible prophecy as the King of the North. Now, my good friend Jake from the Alt Worldly channel published an excellent video debunking this particular aspect of JW doctrine. Honestly, the video is superb and it helped me out a lot. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. And if you're watching this video on a mobile device, you can tap a link to it, which I'll leave right up there. There's also a link to it in the video description below. Now, needless to say, I no longer believe in any of this doctrine at all, not even a little bit. But for reasons that I'll go into later, that doesn't actually matter. So I was at work one morning and the radio was playing the news as it usually does. On the news was the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. Rishi Sunak, who is now the British Prime Minister. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with UK politics, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, to put it simply, is the accountant for the whole country. So Mr. Sunak was talking about the rising cost of living and explaining that we were on the brink of a cost of living crisis. He painted an extremely bleak picture of the weeks, months, and maybe even years to come, saying that the cost of basic necessities like food and energy would continue to rise, seemingly with no end in sight. As I was listening to his words, without any invitation whatsoever, a scripture just popped into my head. It just barged into my conscious mind and started throwing its weight around. And that scripture was Revelation chapter 6 and verse 6, which says,
I heard what sounded like a voice in the midst of the four living creatures say, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the olive oil and the wine."
Now, I'm not sure how mainstream Christianity interprets this scripture, but to Jehovah's Witnesses, this scripture is speaking about the rising cost of living during the time of the end. It means that the ingredients to make simple foods like bread will cost an entire day's wage, leaving little or no money left for small indulgences. So with all of these things happening in the aftermath of a global pandemic, it was as if the world had hit the apocalypse trifecta: war, poverty, and pestilence. At the onset of the anxiety attack, the first thing I noticed was difficulty breathing. My breaths were irregular, short, and shallow. I tried really hard to regulate my breathing, but it was extremely difficult because while that was happening, I was also having palpitations. My heart was absolutely pounding and it was beating way faster than normal. Then I began physically shaking, particularly in my hands, and I found it really difficult to get a firm grasp on anything. Despite how distressing this situation was, it wasn't new or unfamiliar to me. I've had anxiety attacks before, and the most notable example of this was when I researched the JW religion for the very first time on the internet. I had an anxiety attack while searching for ExJW content on YouTube. I desperately wanted to know the truth about the truth that had been hidden from me my entire life. But at the same time, I felt like I was committing the absolute worst of unforgivable sins. I am convinced that the ensuing anxiety attack was a physical manifestation of that inner conflict. I'm equally convinced that the same is true of my most recent attack. In that case, the conflict was between the things I know to be true in my head and, for lack of a better expression, the things I feel in my heart. Now, if it wasn't already obvious from my previous videos, I no longer believe in the Bible, much less the Jehovah's Witness interpretation of it. I no longer believe in a coming tribulation or God's war of Armageddon. But that knowledge did not stop me from being absolutely terrified of those things, because the indoctrination I received over the past 4 decades had conditioned me to be afraid of those things. And the process of learning new facts won't necessarily make all of that indoctrination and conditioning disappear overnight. So if you're currently in or have ever been in a similar situation where there's a conflict between your waking up from Jehovah's Witness indoctrination and a deep-seated fear of Armageddon and the end of the world, what should you do? I want to preface my comments by saying that I'm not a medical professional or in any way qualified to give mental health advice. But I want to tell you some of the things that have helped and are helping me to deal with this kind of anxiety. First of all, therapy. Therapy for me has been an absolute game changer. Personally, I think everyone stands to benefit from therapy regardless of their background or situation. But if you're leaving or have left a high controlled religious group or cult, even more so. Therapy has helped me to understand why I react the way I do in certain situations. And armed with that knowledge, I can take steps to avoid those situations, or at the very least, mitigate the effect that they have on me. It's also helped me to challenge harmful thought patterns that I've developed over the course of my life as a direct result of being indoctrinated with JW ideas and theology. For example, looking after yourself is selfish, taking pride in your achievements is haughty, and we must always yield in personal conflicts in order to keep the peace, to name but a few. Another thing that has helped me immensely is developing healthy relationships with non-JW friends and family members. Whether you're disfellowshipped, disassociated, or faded, the chances are that you're going to experience some kind of shunning. Now, depending on your particular situation, this will have a negative impact on your support system if it doesn't destroy it altogether. I cannot stress enough the importance of building up a new support system, one that's based on genuine love and care as opposed to a shared belief system. For as long as I live, I will never, ever stop speaking about how my non-witness friends, family members, and spouse helped to pull me out of the most darkest of places. In fact, coming to realize how loving and kind worldly people could be is one of the things that woke me up. One final thing that has helped me is research. Taking the time to remind myself of the reasons why I woke up in the first place. Researching and debunking the religion's false doctrines can easily be done, even with the organization's own publications. Now, although research isn't 100% guaranteed to free you from the anxiety of JW end of world predictions, which would you rather choose? Being scared of something you 100% believe to be true, or being scared of something you know deep down to be false? It's a no-brainer. A word of caution with this suggestion though. Avoid being trapped down a rabbit hole. Researching the religion can easily become an obsession if you let it. And with that, there's a danger of re-traumatizing yourself. So unless you've decided to start some kind of activism, it might be a good idea just to limit your research to any particular subject you're struggling with at that time, and then either having a break or moving on completely. If you've been affected by any of the things I've spoken about in this video, please check the video description down below. I've put some links there to some resources that you might find helpful. Also, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to help you in any way that I can, even if it's just to have a chat. And my contact details are also in the video description below. That's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel with notifications so that you're alerted whenever I post new content. Please proceed to the Jexit in an orderly fashion, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching to the very end of the video. If you haven't already done so, please like, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. If you like my work and want to help me continue doing it, please support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Jexit_2020. And with that, I'd like to sincerely thank these very special patrons who make these videos possible.